Episode 79, Is Hollywood Storytelling Dead? Welcome to the Visionary Variety Podcast, where we cover cool stuff like photo, video, film, books, and technology. So switch on your brain and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Visionary Variety Podcast. I am Daniel, your host, and we've got with us a return special guest, Abi León.
Hey, guys.
Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast this week.
Yeah.
I'm super stoked about this discussion. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Hollywood and movies and the stories that make the movies. Where do the stories come from? Are they original? What's up with all the movie remakes? What's going on here? This episode was kind of inspired by an article I saw recently where it just kind of listed a few remakes, and it just kind of hit me. I was like, there are so many remakes. Maybe I'm biased. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll get to that later. But I just feel like there are so many remakes of either old movies that are trying to, bring into the 21st century, or just old stories, old books, or everything's getting into the movie world. Culture is really highlighting on movies lately. Man, I just feel like I'm getting movie remake fatigue. How about you, Abi? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
I would have to completely disagree.
Okay.
Completely disagree. And that's because I'm kind of like an analyst when it comes to the field and the industry. I look at the amount of movies that are being made versus the amount of movies that are being remade or rehashed or retold. I kind of like them. I like to see what new directors, what their take would be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm of the opposite opinion.
Okay.
I don't have any fatigue in that regard.
Yeah, and I do love movies. Like I wish I had more time and money just to go see a movie every week. And I get excited when I see something that I love, like Narnia getting turned into, well, this is a TV show. But, when I see something that I love, that I've got a childhood connection to, and then I see a movie coming out of it, I do get excited.
Yeah.
But the other side of the coin is, in my head is, okay, where are the original stories? And it's probably just my bias. I'm just not seeing those, or I'm not remembering those. I'm remembering all the remakes because of the nostalgia and because all the marketing. My goodness, the marketing of those movies is just like boom. They've already got a track set for them, so the marketing takes out pretty quickly.
Now there's a huge indie market out there. There's thousands upon thousands of indie films, and I think that the disdain for remakes starts there. And the reason is because all of the distribution and marketing money goes to the major blockbusters.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I mentioned this to you in one of our texts before setting this podcast up, that I think what people really have is not a remake fatigue. It's a marketing fatigue. And because these companies are spending 2.5 times their budget for a film in marketing and advertising.
Just to brainwash us with it.
Yeah. And because we are media conscious society now, media is everywhere. I mean, we have AI attached to our hip 24/7 now. That's where I think the fatigue is. I mean, we are a different society. It's not like it was in the 90s or even in the 2000s. I think just the prevalence of media in our lives has made the marketing so much more inundated in our lives. So we see that Marvel trailer 15 times. We see that that rehash or that remake 10 times before we've left lunch. It just shows up in our stream, in our timelines, and in our snaps and in our tweets everywhere. So I think more, if we think about it, it's really just more like a marketing fatigue, because we see it everywhere we turn. When we go to McDonald's, I sound like Morpheus. When you go to church, think about it, even in church, now that I mention it, because now a lot of churches have popularized the notion of, Sunday at the movies, kind of thing, and taking messages from. Movies and multimedia in that regard has pretty much saturated every aspect of our life.
Yeah.
So I think it's a marketing blitz that we're not used to, even from 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think from a business perspective, they probably see it as an easy win. If it's a franchise that already has an established brand and an established fan base from, say, 20 years ago or whatever, like if you put out a really well-made trailer, it's gonna grab all those people's attentions. Whereas if it's a brand new story, like, I don't know, maybe Oblivion or Avatar, when it first came out, they're not familiar with it yet, so it's out of the blue.
Right.
But I just feel like I don't know. I feel like it's a big cash grab. They're jumping off of pre-established brands to make a crap ton of money, and it's almost too easy.
And the reason they do that is because it's actually the law. Now that companies are considered like public trading companies, you know, Disney, Marvel, and all those stuff, that they are required by law to make investors profit. Because they're now a publicly traded company. Studios are now publicly traded. They're not privately owned like they used to be. They used to be like Metro Goldwyn Mayer were three people, you know, were two people, you know, or whatever. Columbia was owned by a single person. You know, there was these magnates that owned these studios, and now that they're more corporations, they're beholden to the investors that are supplying the funds to, or they're investing in these movies. So because of that, they are forced by law to make a profit.
You got to make that quota.
It's kind of like Wall Street, you know, it becomes a creative, artsy Wall Street kind of thing scenario where now it is kind of a cash grab. To some degree, there is art always involved, but it is a cash grab because they're beholden to their investors and their executive financial producers and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I also think to your other point about nostalgia, that I think they do play on the nostalgia part. They're counting on a generation that they indoctrinated decades ago, you know, and that's how, you know, for all intents and purposes, that's how governments work, is they present certain elements to children as they're young so that when they're older, oh yeah, I'm OG. I watched SpongeBob when it first came out. I'm like, that's not OG, you know, has nothing to do with gangsters, you know. But so I think they do play a little bit on nostalgia, and they're cashing in on their early childhood marketing and psychology, and I call it the religion of nostalgia.
Ooh. Well, tell me about that.
Well, you know, you have all of these, and I guess this kind of plays into a couple of your points here down on the show notes. When we're looking at like Disney remaking all of their old animated classics, right? I think it's twofold. There's outrage, and then there's the people that just like are excited.
Consumers, they want it.
Yeah,
they can't get enough.
They're just and people can either be outraged because it wasn't like they remember it, or
classic. That's not my Luke, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Or the other hashtag, not my Ariel, and things like that.
There you go.
Yeah, and we don't need to necessarily hash that out. That's for a different platform, But you know, they do count a little bit on the nostalgia factor. Yeah. I mean, it's all like I said, it's child psychology from 20 years ago. It's like we ingrained this. You know, they count to some degree on remakes. It's not a new thing. It really isn't. And I'll point to a very classic movie that we studied in film school was The Great Train Robbery. The Great Train Robbery was remade a couple years after the original one came out.
Wow, that's fast.
And I think they did one in the 60s, and then they did another one in the 70s. And so the idea of remaking a story is not new. The Great Train Robbery has been remade 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
I actually, even before I knew that they had remade it, I thought, oh, that would be such a cool thesis project. You know, let's remake the original, you know, because the Great Train Robbery is said to be the very first film ever made, very first movie. Not a talkie, but very first movie. And so then when talkies came, they remade it as a talkie, and then they remade it as color, and then they remade it in the 70s or 80s. I can't recall. So it's not necessarily a new thing. It's just I think it's just reinterpreting it for the modern generation. So I would like to see a modern. I guess you have seen a modern movie of the Great Train Robbery with all the. I think Liam Neeson is probably close to.
He's the 21st century train robbery. I was curious about that. You know, is this remaking tactic? I don't want to make it sound like super negative. I'm not like demonizing or anything, but is remaking movies either from an old book or an older movie? Is it a new thing? And because now it's such a, like you said, it's almost part of contracts that you've got to meet certain amounts of money. You've got to meet quotas. So, you know, a certain amount of remakes is the easiest way to do that. But I'm curious what the history is of remaking movies. I know that the 12 Monkeys was actually an adaptation from a very early French film called Le Jeté about time travel. And I don't know how closely 12 Monkeys follows it, but I'm very intrigued by that idea.
Well, we do have a little bit of snobbery when it comes to remakes, because, you know, we tend to think of remakes just within the American industry. But yeah, that's a perfect example, I would say, of remaking a movie. I know that we also take a lot of British shows and movies and remake them in America. I think that a lot of times our ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, we don't know.
That in that we tend to think of remakes as only, oh, well, we remade this American film. It's like, we don't need to remake it, but we've remade foreign films all the time.
Sure.
We remake Chinese and Japanese films all the time. We Americanize them, or whatever that term is, so that it can be consumed by
westernized.
Colonize. It can be consumed by.
Oh no! Don't colonize me.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings us to the next point, which is actually the flip flop. What you just said is that India, they love to make remakes of American films.
Yeah, they love them a lot. I see them all the time.
They're hilarious.
Just in actually one of the biggest filmmaker forums that I'm a part of, Frugal Filmmakers on Facebook, has a huge Indian demographic. And they're always posting a trailer or something where they've tried to remake. A lot of times, most of the things that they put on there are trailers, but you'll see every once in a while like major studio remakes of blatant American,
very blatant
movies. Yeah,
I actually looked it up. I was curious because I'm not really familiar with the Bollywood movies. I know what they look like, and I've watched those just ridiculous action movie clips that are just super crazy. And I'm like, I can't imagine like how this actually got made. But I did look up a list of popular remakes. These are Bollywood movie releases that are pretty much obvious ripoffs of an American or a Western movie, whether normally following the storyline almost to a T, the general gist or the premise of it. So there's just a few. Kanti is a copy of Reservoir Dogs. Kachi 420 is a copy of Miss Doubtfire. Sarkar is The Godfather, which is hilarious. The image that I saw was, a classic, like an older Indian man with like a traditional robe on. I'm thinking, how is he going to be a gangster? Like, I just could not see a peaceful old Indian grandpa looking guy being a gangster killing people. Yeah. But what do I know? I haven't seen the movie. Then there's Sangarsh, and I do apologize if I'm mispronouncing these names, but Sangarsh is The Silence of the Lambs. Creepy. This one makes me laugh. Josh is a Bollywood remake of West Side Story. Just Josh. Yeah. Yeah. And the Tarumpum is Talladega Nights, which includes animated dancing bears.
Wait, what?
You know a Bollywood movie is not complete without a dance sequence, right?
Yes.
Well, their dance sequence has dancing CGI bears. Yeah. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's not necessarily, maybe that's how they got away with it.
Yeah.
It's like we didn't copy it. We enhanced it. Yeah.
we had a dance is different. It's different. You can't sue us.
So we were talking about, the legality of this, right?
Yes.
I can't see any illegality. And this is why I'll take a cue from music, right? Mm-hmm. In music,
good pun there.
in music, if you reproduce the whole song, like if you replay all the instruments, if you the only copyright that you're entitled to is just the royalty. So like if I remake the song, but it sounds like exactly like it, but I played the bass, a friend played the drums, and we did all the recordings and we reproduced it. We added the same similar effects and same vocal lines. So if I remade it, if I reproduced it mechanically all for myself, then
can you make money?
I'm only beholden to a royalty fee to the song owner.
Who sets that? Could they say like that's $100,000 or? Is it?
Yeah, they can set whatever they want. They can set they can set their licensing fee, whatever. Okay. Yeah, whatever that is. So it's okay to, I guess you should go through the right proper channels. But then it's like India is still. I mean, they're not beholden to our copyright laws.
No, they don't care.
So obviously they're not the same quality, but they've gone through the effort to make the mechanical duplication of the movie.
Yeah.
I don't, other than the quality, I don't see anything wrong with it. I can't fathom, like, if they copied the script word by word, I don't know if there's any legality there.
Well, have you seen those clips of that, like, looks like a 1970s film, although it could have been shot a few years ago. It looks like it's from the 70s, and it's basically of like a Spider-Man, a Spider-Woman, and like a Superman character wearing the costumes of, Superman and Spider-Man. Like they're the same costumes. And they're doing ridiculous stuff and dancing and fighting bad guys while they dance, mind you. I mean, that's a intellectual property, the costumes. So if Disney had nothing better to do on a rainy day, they could sue their butts off. Although it's in the past and they're not going to. But.
And although whether or not the laws of India would uphold their objection.
Interesting.
You know, like it wasn't up until recently. This is a completely separate matter, but like, you know, trying to get copyright and intellectual rights enforced in China, it's virtually impossible. There was your and my favorite hobby, Lego, just recently won a huge case there against a company that was infringing on their intellectual property right.
What was the name of them?
Lepin.
Yeah. They actually stole a design from a guy I follow on Instagram. Yeah, I'm sure multiple. This guy made this amazing Gundam model. It was huge, and they ripped him off and sold the set.
Yeah,
like wow.
So they were majorly shut down by the Chinese courts. They were raided. The CEO of Lepin was arrested, and several other people were arrested.
Dang.
So my point being that we just recently that was recently just won, and that wasn't even an American company. That was a Danish company, right? So if we look at that just as an example, not precedence, but if we look at that as an example, and then we talk about India, you know, who's probably significantly further behind in legislation, and it's strictly in legislation is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I can't see them ever doing anything against anybody in India. It's like telling. It's like trying to discipline my neighbor's kids with my rules. You know, it wouldn't necessarily fly, even though it might be right. Like, you know what? You shouldn't be running around with a knife.
Also, Bollywood is a big part of their economy, is it not? Why would they shut that down? Why would they hurt their own major industry?
Exactly. So, obviously, I'm pretty sure that the real stuff probably still gets over there.
Yeah.
But you know what I've noticed in the forums is that a lot of these people that post these, you know, interesting attempts at making film, a lot of them are trying to break out of their own poverty and stuff like that. So they'll scrounge up to get a computer. I mean, in some cases, they've put together computers from parts in landfills.
Oh my gosh!
Now we're getting into some really different, totally off topic. But my point is that in the frugal filmmakers community, you see a lot of people. Like just, hey, seeking advice. What do you think of this? And they're making really cheesy, corny, you know, like that. I think was it the Spider-Man one that Nate shared with us? Was it Nate that shared? Yeah, Nate shares everything with us. It's probably Nate. 99% chance it was Nate. And he shared that really, really bad Spider-Man. But that wasn't Bollywood. I think that was Nigeria. Was that a Nigerian film? Because they have their own thing too.
Interesting.
I think it's called Nollywood with an N. Yeah. And so there's a lot of Nollywood as well that are ripping off IPs. And I just don't think that we have the recourse in the United States to, outside of economic sanctions, but, you know, the government isn't going to get involved in that. No. They're not going to because some, you know, a team of 5 people decided to rip off Spider-Man.
Who piece together a computer, and they didn't make barely any money off of it. So it's like,
if at all, other than they got the coveted exposure.
Ooh, classic exposure bucks.
Yeah.
Well, so let's bring this back to one of our original discussion points is talking about the originality or the lack thereof, in my limited opinion, of movie releases recently. So let's flip the script and talk about more original stories. So I kind of made a quick little list of some stories that, in my opinion, I feel like are very original and creative. And I
like this list.
And as far as I know, they don't come from books. As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong with one or the two of these, but I think I got about 8 or 9 of these. So my list is Avatar, Fifth Element, Oblivion, The Matrix, Memento, which honestly I haven't seen Memento. I want to.
Okay.
But every time I hear it discussed, it just seems like a really, not copying from anybody. It's a very unique story. Star Wars: A New Hope, Sixth Sense, and Fight Club. What do you think about those? Do you agree, disagree?
I completely agree. I would add Inception.
Oh, yes.
I would add Inception.
How dare I not add that?
I would add even more of the Wachowski brothers stuff, Jupiter Ascending, Cloud Atlas.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Very imaginative.
Yeah, very imaginative. Transcending things. The movie Interstellar was fantastic.
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Now, these movies that you brought up and that I mentioned have done pretty good as far as money and
Right.
box office reception. But there's a host of movies that are flops, at least financially, but that are really unique and good. And I came across that last week too, and I shared it. I said, "Do movies fail because they're different?"
Right.
And I feel like some of those kind of rebounded and they got a cult following over the next 10 years and they did good in the long run. But when they came out, they were just maybe so creative and so out of the blue that people didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah. M. Night Shyamalan was one of the guys that pioneered recently, that has been on the forefront of just telling original stories with Signs and
The Village.
what was that one? The Village.
Oh, that was
Yeah,
so
The
good.
Village.
Yeah, I really like
The
that.
Happening was not good, but it was
Wah, wah.
original story. But it was an original story. Even the way he's tied in Unbreakable, Split, and Glass.
Genius.
Just genius.
Yeah.
Genius.
So cool.
And so there's that. Those are fantastic. And not necessarily hugely blockbuster, but I think they did fairly well.
So M. Night Shyamalan and Christopher Nolan, they're directors, producers, and writers? Like, what is their role with the writing of the story?
They're pretty much the modern auteurs. Okay, so you look at the Ed Wood kind of thing, where they wanted to be the writer, the director, the producer, the lead actor kind of thing. Christopher Nolan wasn't one, but we know that M. Night Shyamalan inserts himself in every movie he makes. Which is not necessarily a bad thing because he does it tastefully.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he does it tastefully. Yeah, I would like to think of myself as if I had the clout, I'd probably would love to be an auteur because I have a vision in my mind. I have of how I want it to act. I have a face for podcasts, not for radio or not for TV. So that's the only thing holding me really back.
Got a face for
holding
YouTube.
me back. Yeah, face for YouTube. I can get away with YouTube. I can't get away with like KSAT 12 or nothing. I think they're the modern day auteurs for the most part. Bruce Willis, Mel Gibson probably comes to mind too.
So let's say I write a script that I feel is solid. It could fit as a good movie format, and I have a good script, right? So, and I want to sell it. Can I sell my story to someone? Like, what? How does that work? Is that a thing?
Technically, yes, you can. But the likelihood is highly unlikely.
You're killing
now.
the dreams.
I know, man. Well, I'm killing my own dreams because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
It really boils down to networking in regards to that. Totally. I do have some networks that have not exploited that I'm waiting for the right time, the right story.
Okay.
Yeah, but the biggest way to sell a story, if that's the route you want to take, I'm telling you, this is a $500,000 script or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. There's a story I read about M. Night Shyamalan and his script for Sixth Sense, how he sold it and stuff like that, how he held off and blah blah blah. But is to enter contests.
Okay.
Is to enter contests at places like Screencraft, Stage 32.
Are these writing contests or
these are
film?
Screenwriting? These are screenwriting contests.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's strictly screenwriting contest. Stage 32. I'm trying to think. There's a couple other out there, but those are the big ones that come to mind. Stage 32 and Screencraft. Some of the more popular ones. The best thing to do would be like to enter those, and there's usually like a $30 or $40 fee. But then you can pay for like one of their professionals to send notes back.
Oh, cool.
And I anytime I enter, I always pay for that extra one.
Yeah.
Just because it's so helpful. The other thing to do is get involved with your local screenwriters guild, which every major metropolitan area is probably going to have one. And the reason I say that is because there's going to be people that are script writers in there, or script supervisors that would help you polish your script.
Cool.
Now, why am I saying this? Because when you have a more polished product, it's more easier to network that product once you actually start getting connected with people in the know.
It's like if you write your own novel, getting an editor will take it to the next level.
Exactly. Actually, exactly the same. Yeah. That's the way you would think is the traditional way to get your script sold. But I have found that unless you win or in the top 5 of the contests, or somebody directly connected to the industry, then you're probably not going to do so hot.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it could be. The reason is because of what we talked about earlier at the top of the podcast with major studios now beholden to investors. They're looking for high concept, not necessarily high budget, but high concept, full quadrant scripts that'll appeal to adults, that'll appeal to kids, male and female.
Yeah.
And a wide demographic of age too. And so unless it hits all those points, like if you're just a horror genre guy, you're not gonna sell your script because everybody starts out. The majority of people start out writing horror scripts because they're relatively simple to write.
Yeah,
because it's a lot of action and gore, not a whole lot of story.
Yeah.
The hard ones to write are family comedies. Those are really hard. And then sci-fi dramas. Those are the next. Some of the popular ones. But what they'll do is they'll buy us. Well, they won't buy, but they'll commission us scripts like, hey, we have this idea, this log line that we picked up, whatever. What if out on the interwebs they're talking about this? What if we make a log line regarding this kind of situation out in the real world and put a sci-fi twist on it? And then they'll hire like 3 or 4. This major studios will hire like 3 or 4 proven script writers to develop it. So, and they do that because they know that those guys are going to give them a return on their money.
And those guys know how it all works. Like they know the format, they know the movie stuff that to put in there. I asked because I'm kind of sitting on like a number of stories, not from movies, honestly. I don't want to go into the movie world yet, but I actually want to get into short stories and then possibly novels and series in the future.
So in that regard, the best thing to do is to get yourself a local team that can help translate those short stories into short independent films. And there's hundreds of little short film festivals and things like that, even some major ones like My Road Reel, where it's a 3-minute film competition for exposure and for thousands and thousands of dollars in prizes.
Cool.
And it's just a matter of trusting a team of friends that can help bring that to fruition.
Knowing the right people.
But you have some. You always post like Daniel Dreams, hashtag Daniel Dreams.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and a lot of those little things, those are really, really cool. I think I've encouraged you in the past that you need to just figure those out or pass them off to some of your script writing friends and say, hey man, turn this into a 3-minute short or a 5-minute short.
In case you're clueless, what Abi just mentioned, the Daniel Dreams, they actually do a hashtag for some of my Facebook posts, which is hashtag Daniel Dreams. And those are, my dreams. I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, that was so cool. I want to share it and get some laughs or get some thoughts on it. And I usually copy and paste them or write additional details into a document that I have on my computers. And I like to keep track of that. Sometimes I'll come up with other stories too. Like I'm reading a book and I kind of go on a rabbit trail, like from a what if, from a story, from a movie. And it's, it's not a ripoff. It's like its own idea, but I'll write down stories in that document. And I've got, last I checked, I have over 5,000 words and I've added quite a few since. So I'm probably up to 5,500 words. And those are just like synopsis. That's not a story. It's like a paragraph or 2 per idea. And I really want to develop those and kind of start with some short stuff, like start with a novella or a short story. See where that goes. But that's something I want to do maybe the next 10 years. That'll be really fun.
Yeah, I actually went back to look for because I had a document thing too, and I've lost it.
Oh,
I must have had So.
I've had nightmares of that. And I use Evernote, which is a cloud-based thing, so it's not local, but I still want to get it, like save it in a few places, maybe print it, because it's got some serious memories there.
I had mine in iCloud, and I thought it saved it from device to device.
No.
But yes, it all boils down to who you know. And the other thing is, on occasion, some not major studios will never accept an unsolicited script.
They're like, who are you? Get out of my face. I'm busy.
Yeah, seriously.
I don't know who you are.
I mean, we're talking about literal piles of kindling for fireplaces.
To the furnace.
Yeah, and so we've kind of joked about it on some forums that the spec script is essentially dead. The speculative script is essentially dead, and that's because major studios aren't receiving them. They're not receiving them. So
now I didn't know what a spec script was before I spoke with you before this episode. So tell the other clueless listeners, what is a spec script?
It's just that it's a speculative script. It's something that let's say you turn one of your Daniel Dreams into a 90-page feature.
Okay,
right. That then becomes a speculative script because nobody commissioned you to.
Right, it's my own.
But you want to sell it to maybe a major studio or even a minor studio.
Okay.
Then that's just become a speculative script. It's nobody asked you to do it. Say, hey, Daniel, do you have something on the Book of Revelations? Let's and then you know what? I do have a couple ideas. Let me put, and then that becomes actually just a script.
Yeah.
But a spec script is something that you just created out of the blue to try and push and pawn off onto a studio.
Okay.
But, interestingly, the minor studios, like I'll give you one example, like Blumhouse Pictures, right? Blumhouse is the studio behind Get Out, Us, The Purge.
Yeah.
Kind of like those
gritty, edgy movies.
Yeah. They on occasion open up for spec scripts. I think they just recently closed. They did one, I want to say 6 months ago.
You mentioned how many submissions they get?
Yeah, tens of thousands. Yeah, and so you have to put your log line on the front, and and if you don't have them within the first, I want to say people say 5 pages.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
The formatting. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, if your formatting is off, they'll just not even bother.
Wow.
So, but the cool thing is that occasionally smaller studios like that will open up for independent spec scripts.
My secret plan to infiltrate Hollywood is I'm going to write amazing, mind-blowing novels, and then a producer or director is going to be like, wow, I need to turn a Daniel Grove novel into a movie, and I'll be rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you'd be rich, though, by today's standards. I mean, because now, when people say $1 million, well, $1 million isn't nothing in California.
Well, that's a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, it's a lot for maybe you and I, but
in Texas.
But not in Austin, but not in Dallas.
No.
Not in Houston,
No, it's just
in San Antonio, it's still a lot, I think. But yeah, the key is to keep writing. So one thing that I got from one of my mentors, that's actually an industry insider, is to have 3 to 5 scripts when you're presenting the one that you want to sell.
Like backups, or what do you mean?
No, just to have a portfolio. Because if they like that first one, they're going to want to see more.
Oh, okay.
He said, if I like your first script, I want to see what else you have.
Oh, I see. And you don't want to say, well, I don't have anything else.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to have anything else, because then they'll put you on option. And option, I have a friend that's on option, and he's been on option for like 7 years. And it's like he gets paid $1 a year for the script. And he gets told about rewrites, and it's like, hey, rewrite this, rewrite that. And the concept is pretty cool. Yeah. The concept is pretty cool. We've talked about it a little bit. Kind of a courtesy NDA. We don't talk about it, but he's got it optioned with a major producer. Cool. And he's just rewriting it according to what the producer sends back as far as notes.
They're just stringing them along, basically.
No, he told me that they're told him that they're waiting for the time to drop this movie, because they know it's coming. It's just not the time. So right now there's a big, I guess, Asian influence and black actor leads. So they're looking for a lot of scripts that are that driven, but they're not driven towards, any other people of color. So they're waiting for that persuasion to infiltrate the industry as far as audience attention.
There are definite trends and ebbs and flows of things like that in the movie world. You'll see them, moving around if you pay attention to a lot of movies that come out per year.
Yeah.
So we've talked about selling or not being able to sell a story to a movie to the movie world, but that brings me up to my next discussion is twin films. Are you familiar with that term?
A little bit. I think that's like we were talking about it briefly, and is that when like movies that come out with the same premise, kind of like really close together?
Yeah, really suspiciously close together.
Suspiciously.
Yeah. So why does that happen? What do you know about that?
Okay, so what I know is that in times past, when a logline or an idea gets shopped around, well, what they do is they take that logline and the idea and they say, you know what, this is a great thing. We're not going to buy that script, but we're going to make our own.
Oh,
and so that's essentially what it is. And then it just becomes a race to see who comes to market first. And then it becomes a race to see what names you can attach to it.
So is that kind of ripping off the author without paying him for it? I mean,
well, if it's a spec writer,
if
it's a spec writer, sometimes he'll double dip. He'll write 2 scripts.
Okay.
If it's somebody with an agent or something like that, they probably won't do that. But it just becomes a matter of premise. If the premise is completely different, but just the locations and the idea is there, you can't copyright an idea.
Yeah.
You can copyright a script. And so it does become a little bit shady. But generally speaking, if one does well, the other one does as also.
What if I send something off to, let's get crazy and say Warner Brothers and Disney, and they both buy it? Is that possible?
No, then what happens is they'll probably refer you to some sort of agent or agency that'll mediate for you. That'll mediate for you, and they'll negotiate between the two.
Okay.
So let's say Warner Brothers picks it up, but Disney really liked the idea. It's like, well, we like the idea, so we're going to make something of our own.
Man. Inspired by Daniel Grove's dreams.
Yeah. Well, what they'll do is they'll take the concept, they'll take the location, and just, it's kind of like legal ripoff, I guess.
Interesting.
It's really not necessarily. I mean, it sucks for whoever's the originator and the spec writer, if it's even a spec writer.
Yeah.
The audience benefits from two different stories. A good example is White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen.
Yep, so similar.
I think Olympus Has Fallen was the one with Gerard Butler, right? And White House Down was the one with Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx, right?
Yeah, in 2013, both of them.
I liked both of them. They were both good. I think my wife liked White House Down one,
and Channing Tatum,
just because. Yeah, well, Jamie Foxx. We're fans of Jamie Foxx, and he's just hilarious. He's just a hilarious guy. I liked the Gerard Butler one just because it felt more like a spy, comeback story kind of thing, and then not only that, but then they did the follow-up movie, which was London Has Fallen.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was equally as good. It was a really good story.
Everything's fallen.
Yeah, Moscow. Moscow's the next one. I wouldn't put it past them. But yeah, so what happens is the log line gets shopped around, and neither buying team has the full script. So what they'll do is they'll take the log line and develop something based off of a log line. It's not necessarily stealing, but it kind of is.
What exactly is a log line? Like, give me a movie example that I'm familiar with, and then tell me what the log line might be for that.
Oh, hot dog. I don't know what their log lines are by heart.
Is it like a sentence that describes what's happening?
It's two sentences.
Oh, okay.
That describe the general premise of the movie. Yeah. Let me see if I could. Let me see if I could look up really quick a famous log line.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't even include the title. Let's see here.
In a world, one boy, one girl.
Here we go. The aging patriarch of an organized crime dynasty transfers control of his clandestine empire to his reluctant son. What's that?
Oh, man. I don't know. What is it?
The Godfather.
Oh, I was thinking that, but I haven't seen The Godfather, so I didn't want to make an idiot of myself. Okay.
Let's see. A computer hacker learns from mysterious rebels about the true nature of his reality and his role in the war against its controllers.
Matrix.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Something a little bit older. Two imprisoned men bond over a number of years, finding solace and eventual redemption through acts of common decency.
Shawshank Redemption?
Yes, Shawshank Redemption. Good job.
Good movie. I have seen that.
Let's see here.
This would be a fun board game, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So actually, that's a good idea
for movie. For movie people. I guess
one of the sponsors. Yeah, so the log line is basically a sentence or two that describes the premise of the movie, and so they'll shop interest for a log line with a log line.
Cool.
And sometimes they don't usually. Sometimes a couple pages of the script, or the establishing pages of a script, or a treatment. A treatment is a more involved. Like this is where it takes place. This is who's involved. This is where we would. This is a location idea. So a treatment is how you would treat that log line into a movie, and then you have the script. So you have the log line, you have the skeleton, you have the treatment, and then you have the script.
Interesting.
Skeleton is basically like an outline of events.
Yeah.
I adhere to what's called a story clock, which is just basic. I don't know if we talked about it in a previous podcast, but it's basically like an outline, but instead of being outlined line upon line, the events happen on a clock face, and you kind of just like, hey, by quarter of this should have happened by 25 minutes. This should have happened by halfway through the movie. This should have happened. So on and so forth. So that's it's a different way to visualize the movie. And that's what an outline does.
Yeah.
Cool. A treatment is how you would make it. And then the script is the script.
Well, jumping back to the twin films idea, I found a little list, just a few that you can. You can find a really extensive list on Wikipedia, and that list goes way back, like decades. But here's a few that I found that I was personally familiar with. So Dante's Peak and Volcano came out in 1997. They were released 2 months apart from each other.
I remember those movies.
Next is Ants and a Bug's Life in 98, also a month apart. This is when I first noticed it, because obviously, even as a kid, I was like, well, there's two computer graphics, bug, ant-like movies. Like what? Who did the same people make these? I don't know what was going on. But as I grew up and I saw more twin films, I kept thinking back to Ants and a Bug's Life. That was like where it first clicked for me. And an interesting little note, I didn't know this, but Steve Jobs was the boss of Pixar. Did you know that?
He developed Pixar. I
didn't even know that.
Yeah, he developed when he left Apple, he developed the company Next. Which was a computer company, which in turn turned into, they became like really graphics oriented. Wow. And he founded Pixar out of Next.
Interesting.
So Next became Pixar. Yeah.
I knew he left Apple and did something, but and Apple flopped. But during that time, or leading up to Ants, Jeffrey Katzenberg actually left Disney to start a rival company, which was DreamWorks. Yeah,
right.
They got a little feud going on, at least back in the past. And that Ants was DreamWorks' first film, and their second film, which I didn't know this until I looked it up, was The Prince of Egypt, an amazing movie. So
I remember when that first came out. Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer because we weren't as inundated with media like we were. Like you actually had to go to the movies to watch trailers. And when that showed up, I was like, oh, I remember we were in Killeen, Texas, and it just, like the whole crowd was overwhelmed when they saw the trailer. Like there was literal cheers coming, like they couldn't believe it. And then I reflected on it, and then I was like, wait a minute, they're making Bible stories into cartoons, And I was like, is that going to kind of maybe water down but Prince of Egypt was fantastic.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
It did a good justice to the scripture, which is interesting because it's a secular company. Maybe they're Christian authors. I don't know. So a few more movies was Deep Impact and Armageddon in 98, also 2 months apart. Awesome movies, both of them.
Which one is your favorite? Which one is your favorite from those two?
That's a trick. Quite Deep Impact is so emotionally gripping, and Armageddon is just fun and awesome to watch.
I loved Deep Impact so much better. I think I couldn't get past the cheesy writing in Armageddon.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Deep Impact.
Yeah, Deep Impact is my favorite. I loved
Elijah Wood,
Lily Sobieski. What's her? I can't remember how to pronounce her name.
I have a little bit of a Hollywood crush on her. She's kind of one of my I really like her. And Elijah Wood did awesome. There is a scene in there that almost made me cry. And listeners of the podcast know I don't cry in movies. I'm not.
Oh no.
I don't know. My brain doesn't get to that level of consumption where I'm emotionally invested enough.
Let me guess. What part?
Oh yeah, guess.
Was it when they handed the baby off to?
How did you? How did you know that? You heard it.
Was it?
I mentioned it in a previous
No, I
episode.
haven't. I was just guessing because that's the one that hit me in the feels too.
Yes. We're dads. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're just like,
they have
having to give up your kid to save your kid because and then she just starts crying. She's like, "Mama, no!"
Gets me right.
Instant mom. Right in the feels. Yeah.
Yep, that's the scene. Next is I move on before I get teary-eyed. Next is Cop Out.
Go watch it.
Yeah. Next is Cop Out and The Other Guys. The Other Guys was hilarious. I enjoyed that film. Did you see it?
Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell.
The opening scene was just like, what is happening?
I liked Cop Out too. I liked both of those movies. Both of those were great.
Those movies came out in 2010. And then, of course, we mentioned Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down in 2013. And then No Strings Attached in 2011 and Friends with Benefits in 2012. Oddly similar stories. Maybe.
Yeah, I actually didn't watch that one. Only because I watched the one with Mila Kunis. Is it Mila Kunis and
JT
and Justin Timberlake?
Yeah, that's Friends with Benefits. Wait, no. Is that Strings Attached? I don't know. I'm mixing them up.
I can't remember.
There's some big names in both those movies. Big stars. Okay, so to bring this full circle, Is the storytelling device of Hollywood via being movies, is it dead? Are the stories coming out of Hollywood, is it dead? What do you think?
I think generally speaking, if we take into consideration everything that we've said about major corporations being beholden to to investors and things like that, I when it comes to original storytelling, I'd say that they're lacking far behind.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that they're dead, but they're on life support. I think they're still I think they'll still put out a bunch of stories, but the stories like what we've mentioned in our little list, Interstellar, Matrix, Fifth Element, those kinds of stories. I don't think. I think those will be few and far between.
Would you say that the industry kind of ebbs and flows, like I said earlier, in and out of original storytelling, maybe every 5 to 10 years? Like maybe it'll come back in a few years?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think that ebbs and flows anymore. That's my opinion, of course. I think that if you talk about original storytelling, I think that they're dead. I think that they're going into a different arc of storytelling. These long form movies, Marvel and MCU, like they're trying to establish these. I think that's probably what's prevalent right now in major corporations. I think we have to look at companies like Netflix, Amazon Prime, maybe even Disney Plus, even though they're part of a big major arm, right?
Yeah.
I think you look at
they're tying in TV shows directly into movies. Like you can't know the full story unless you not only watch the show but pay for their service. So that's a new business step. Not new, but they're probably going to get copycatted by a lot of other people.
That's their. So it's not just universal. It's not just a universe story or a story universe. It's like they're trying to encompass every aspect of your media consumption.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that pretty soon you're going to have to buy video games in order to know the story.
Yeah, they're all going to be canon.
I remember back in the early 2000s when Matrix 2 and 3 came out, the Wachowskis made video games that tied in directly to the movies.
That's right.
And then if you wanted to know more about like the Osiris, the ship of the Osiris, you could pilot the Osiris ship in one of the video games. If you wanted, they even included extra scenes in the video games that were not in movies.
Genius.
And so I think they're way ahead of their time, and but I could see how that is going to be part of the norm. Maybe VR. Like you want to delve. Actually, the Justice League did that with the PlayStation VR game that they released. Were you aware of that one?
No, I didn't know about that.
So yeah, they released a PlayStation exclusive VR game for Justice League where you could actually interact inside the Justice League movie.
Wow.
Not very popular, but it was there. Yeah, it existed.
And I think Marvel kind of realized what they did with their first phase of shows, being like Daredevil, all the Defender shows. They were fun, some obviously better than others, but they kind of shot themselves in the foot because you didn't have to watch them. You could watch just the movies and totally miss out on the shows, and you would be fine because they didn't really influence each other. And ultimately, they were not MCU, even though there was some crossover mentions. Like they've kind of uncanonized, as far as I know, those versions of the characters in the shows. And now with this new phase 4 and the shows that are accompanying it on Disney Plus, those are the opposite. Those are truly true canon, and they have the big name actors in them too. So they're kind of like fixing what they did in the past and making the maximum profit off of tying them together directly.
Yeah. So this whole idea of like immersion into their storyline is they still have a few elements. I think video games and VR is the next step.
Interesting.
So long form TV is there now.
Yeah.
And everybody's doing that. But I think probably video games and
it's a big industry.
And VR will probably be the next thing.
Yeah.
Maybe even like augmented reality games like what they do with Pokemon and then the upcoming Minecraft world.
Oh, cool.
Those will probably become methods for product immersion.
Yeah. Yep. About the money. In the end, it's all about the money.
Yep. And it reminds me of that TV show. Is it Continuum? Where in the future it's corporations that run the government.
Yeah.
Where like, and there's police forces that these corporations, that are all about consumption of their product.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if it's coming, but it could be there. So, just to bring back the idea, I think that things are just shifting. As technology increases, as immersion in technology increases, or it becomes part of our everyday lives, like our phones are part of our everyday lives now. But then, who knows what Google Glass, if that, or what's that, the HoloLens and things like that, once
Windows.
those become, and then the most recently announced Neuralink by Elon Musk.
That sounds scary.
It's very intrusive to us. Yeah, we would think that's so ridiculous, but then we take your cell phone back 100 years.
Yeah.
And tell people, yeah, my whole life is on this thing. And they're like, what, are you crazy? It's like, well, all of my information technically is.
I'm pretty sure in the future, I'm going to have a discussion with my grandchildren and they're going to say, you actually had to push buttons? You actually had a screen? You had cables? Like what? Why?
Yeah.
And, they'll have taken for granted because by that time they'll all have implants and control stuff neurally. So,
yeah, I watched a podcast on that and it was just real intense. I was like, ooh, I don't know, man.
Too much.
I like the idea. Yeah, too much. So I think that's the ultimate form of immersion. But then are you getting into like the Matrix stuff where then you're just you're just always plugged in?
Yeah. You'll just be in a happy pod and have nothing but awesome content coming into your brain and you'll be out of touch with the real world.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another episode.
It sure is. My final statement would be, I don't think Hollywood storytelling is dead. I think that the tide is shifting to different mediums.
Yep.
By which we tell stories.
Very cool. Well, I totally
it's on
agree.
life support. Yeah. On life support.
I totally agree. There's definitely some weak points and some failures in my personal, preference of storytelling and how things would happen. But it's evolving and finding, ways to make maximum profit, which is that fuller, bigger immersion of shows and games. And we'll see where it goes. But I really, really enjoyed this episode, Abi. Thanks so much for joining me.
Man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sharing your expertise, because you know way more about this stuff than I do. And that's why you're here.
There you go.
No, well, we love having you on the show. Well, thanks again. And everybody who listened, if you have any opinions about this whole topic, I know we talked about a lot of different things in here, but we would love to hear back from you guys. Where do you think storytelling is going? Do you like it? Do you hate it? What are your opinions on all these remakes? And what are your favorite original films too? That's one of my favorite topics. I love to know what movies someone else just loves to the end of the earth. That kind of tells me a lot about that person. So feel free to share your opinions and your lists on our Facebook or Instagram or YouTube accounts. All right. Well, thanks for listening and you have a great week.
Take care.
If you like this show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find our previous episodes there and listen whenever you want. We love to hear from our listeners, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future episodes, you can reach us at tvvpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week. All right, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, talk into the microphone and tell me your podcast.
We are going to go on a spaceship in a few minutes. We have to get all the people ready for our baby podcast with Daddy. And he has the baby headphones on right now.
Finish your podcast.
We are going to do a baby podcast about baby club podcast.
A baby podcast about baby podcasts?
Yeah, a baby podcast.
All right, well, say goodbye to your listeners.
Goodbye, listeners. I'm going on a rocket ship. Okay?